Hello, this is Morgan doing another tutorial, getting everybody hopefully as prepared as I possibly can to do your independent perspective drawings and hopefully to get you guys on the right path. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is getting the line work that you're then going to move into Photoshop with. So we can start from Rhino. We want to be in your perspective view. Here you see my seaplane is actually in the wrong direction. That doesn't matter, but for the purposes of just always teaching stuff, if your seaplane's ever facing the wrong direction, when I draw a plane, it's going to draw it this way rather than like flat on top of these buildings like we want it to. So to fix that, we can just type seaplane, click world seaplane, and click top, and that will flatten it back out so that when we draw this again, it's now flat. So what we want to do is we want you guys, this is my Perloff model, I'm just going to use this for explanation purposes. But let's say I'm trying to take a shot of this hallway as my perspective that I'm going to render or post-digitalize or whatever you guys are going to do. What I want to do is make sure that my camera is actually centered and moving in a straight line through this courtyard at head height, right? A perspective indicates the nature of an eye seeing it, so we want this thing to be around an eye's height. So something I'm going to do is I'm actually going to draw a line where I want the camera to be looking and where I want the camera to start. So I'm going to click on this corner of this side of the wall and then spin this thing around and then click on this corner, or this, I said corner, I meant midpoint, this side of the wall, and I'm going to hit enter, which will leave this line here. And then I'm just going to move that line vertically 6 feet. I don't think I got the vertical button. There we go. So I'll make it 6 feet in the air, which leaves us here. So this would be almost where I want my guy to be. But it's a little hard, and it's hard to know like at what level this is going to be correct or when the line is in the right spot. So what we'll actually do is go to the perspective and right click, set camera, and then place camera and target. And so now we can click on one side of this line, spin the camera around and click on the other side, and it'll actually attach us to the end of the line, and we're looking straight down the object. And so what we can do is we can clearly see here the view that we're looking at. And everybody's going to be using Rhino Perspective View to probably start these Make2Ds. The next step is to go over here to the properties on the tab and make sure you have nothing else selected. If you have something else selected, this won't appear. But if you hit escape and you have nothing else selected, you'll see lens length. And lens length works the same way it works in an actual camera. So the lower the lens length, the wider the view. The smaller the lens length, the shorter the view. And it's really how much can get captured in the shot. I would say that everybody here should stay between 50 and 25. 25 might be too long for some people, but 25 might be the closest we get to the human eye. That's one way to get more in your shot or less in your shot, depending on the size of your space. Once we've selected our shot, what we're going to do is we're going to want to select everything in our viewport for our Make2D. So we can type in here, select visible, and then drag a window over visible. And I'm going to start top right and go bottom left. And that selects everything in view. And then I'm going to type Make2D, which will then say you want this in your view. And I'm going to add viewport rectangle to the line work here. Hit OK. It's going to take it a second. It might not be super great. We will see. So what we're left with is this Make2D, which we will have to edit. So we're going to go through. Did I lock some layers? Let us see. Oh, that is the that green line there is the green line of the center point. That's hilarious. But the first thing we're going to go through is go through and remove all the lines that don't make sense. So all these ones going into the floor definitely aren't on my list of lines to keep. Just remove those. Remove you. I can delete this one and I'll trim. I'm just selecting all the lines, typing trim, and then mousing over the one that we don't want. I'd also remove any lines that are on the floor that we don't want. But even at this point, what we want to make sure is that you have a line everywhere you guys want to show or relate material. So this wall right now is all one material. This floor right now is all one material. So what I might do is go through and draw lines from these columns across the floor to start to break up the floor module. And then maybe even I start to say like, hey, maybe the wall and floor are divided by the same module, though I don't like that ceiling line, by the same module as the columns. And so what I'm starting to do is really break down this scene into the parts that are going to be in my collage or digital collage, post-digital collage. We can have a conversation about language later. But in the perspectives that you all are going to complete, however you see fit. And you'll notice that because we're drafting these things, that we end up with the ability to basically edit anything we want. We're drawing it, and because we're drawing it, we can make changes. We can also, if you really want to get into it, model little things extra in the shot. So in the example in class today, there were some paintings or wall panels on these walls. And if I was to really get into that, maybe I'd set it up so that I could actually easily complete that. But something else we can do is, if you guys have never drawn a perspective, we can find the center point of the perspective or something really close to it. And start to draw to our vanishing point. So if you guys have drawn a perspective before, this won't be new to you. But and optimally, we'd want that vanishing point to be exactly at my 6 foot line. I just picked the middle there. But now we have this piece here, and we could pretty easily start to make it stand off the wall. We wouldn't be able to see the bottom or the sides, so suddenly, the top, bottom, or side. So suddenly this leaves us with something on that wall that we can place pretty seamlessly. Same thing goes for anything that you guys wanted to do for the roof. You want to start to make some deviations, divide it by thirds, divide it by halves, what have you. This is the place to do that. Either model it or just draw it. Drawing it might give you a better idea. Might give you a better idea for what you actually are making something that looks like. Whoa, that sentence made no sense. I'm tired. It's late. So let's say that we're done here. We are going to take this and export it to Illustrator, at which point we will export this file to just as like probably 0.25 line weight lines onto another thing, and I'll show you that right now. So let's file export selected, Adobe Illustrator, and I'll call this desktop T.A. Jimenez, and we'll call this perspective test 1. Scale is not going to matter a whole lot here, and so we're going to open an Illustrator file. This is just something I already had open. I'm going to open, that's a different file. J. Jimenez, and we're looking for a perspective test. So we're here. Oh, and I made it absolutely huge because I didn't scale anything. So real quick, I'm going to close both of these files. No, don't save And we're going to file export selected, and I'm going to perspective test save, replace it, yes. I did 1 inch equals 1 inch, so it was real world sized, probably not what we want. I'm going to do 12 inches, which is a foot, equals point, let's say 2.5. That's the 1/4 inch that we've been working on. This won't matter. I just want it to be visible here. Perspective test. So yeah, there it is. And the next thing we're going to do is go to your canvas tool, and we want to make sure that your canvas tool is the correct, is in the correct units. So something we can do, honestly, you know what's even easier than what I was going to suggest is let's just make a new custom artboard. And we're going to make it full resolution HD. So we're going to change from inches to pixels. And we're going to make it 1920 by 1080, which is default resolution for many monitors unless you're going 4K. But we're not going to worry about that. So 1920 by 1080, we'll create that. That's this thing right here. Then I will grab this line work, Control C, Control V, and now I'm just going to scale it to fit this page dimension, which is pretty close to what I already had, if not on some of your screens might be exactly right. Once we reach this point and we've actually lined up, I'm going to Control G to group the thing, and then I'm going to use my align tools here at the top. Align to artboard, click the bottom. It will align to the bottom, and then I'll scroll up to the top and then just stretch it to align with the top, so now it's exactly in line. And then I'll center it, which gives us all of our line work here. And then I'm just going to select all these lines and maybe make them 0.5 so they're a lot thinner. I'll also make them all black. And I'm going to have to put this back to 0.5, which will leave us with this. There's some couple oddities that I could have gone in and changed. Some things here don't make perfect sense. But at this point, what we would do is we would export as a PNG, call this perspective test PNG. Actually, I don't want to type that. Use artboards, hit export. Let's do high resolution 300 ppi. That's fine, and we want a transparent background. So we're going to hit OK. And at this point, we can open Photoshop. Which will take 1 moment to open. And I can open from my TA Jimenez folder my perspective test PNG, which comes in massive because we set it to 300. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce it down, and you can see width and height resolutions on the sides there, to just slightly larger than 1920 by 1080, and we'll rescale at the end. And the goal is that if it's a little big, then we're fine. If it's a little small, we can be in trouble. Actually, though, let me just do this the correct way, which is we can just crop as well, and that will take our artboard down to a size that makes sense. So we'll snap to those edges and then snap to that edge, and we can hit go. The next thing you're going to do is we're going to add a solid color here. We clicked this button, solid color. We're going to pick white, and we'll drag that underneath your layer. Ooh, drag that underneath. All right, we can drag this one over top. Fine. And this is what you're going to start with in Photoshop to begin the process of, in a very painterly fashion, rendering your scene. Something to keep in mind, and I'm going to link another video here that Ken was happy enough to share, or friendly enough to share with me. This video will take you from the line drawing state to the kind of rendering state. But I would ask you all to maybe push the possibilities of what you guys can do with this further than kind of this image. I would suggest really looking at the examples Jimenez has provided. Go back to the recording from today, and really look at those critically. I think some of them are just amazing, and he changes his shoe color. Hilarious. The other thing I would say is that some of Jimenez's examples, I think I might have one over here. One moment. Yeah. So looking at some of these works, you'll notice that a difference between these and the one you saw in that example, and I really just look at these images, is that few or substantially fewer of these are defined by white lines at the corners. So if you look at this collage, they're kind of still allowing those black lines that we started with to exist in the form of white lines. But in these images, we've completely removed ourselves from the world of line. So the thinner we make our black lines that we're basing this off of, the smaller the chance of these things kind of, those white kind of lines organizing our work. So in Photoshop, once again, let's say I knew where I was going next, I would add myself a layer. Let's say I labeled this like, and I'm just going to do some wild stuff right now, not really thinking through this too much. But if I had concrete, I would go on images and type concrete texture. Just look for something a little subdued. Like that, sure. Save image. I'm going to save it in there. I'm just going, you guys can organize your materials correctly. I'm just going to drag it in here. It goes right onto this layer. And the thing I would do is, and you'll see this in that video, but I would start to ask myself, where is everywhere this texture is going to be? So let's say for this example, like it's all of the columns on this wall. Then what I'd do is I'd edit, transform, distort, and I would grab this corner and pull it over here. This corner, pull it up to the top here. Grab this corner, bring it down to that edge, and this corner and bring it down somewhere over here. And optimally we'd want a straight line at this edge, but we are higher than we are tall. And it's better to make it bigger than small, because if it's too big, you'll see here in a second, that's kind of fine. And so we have this texture and it's overlaid that area. I'm just going to hide it, go to my magic wand tool, go to my line layer, select inside of each of these locations. Some of these may get really thin, and like I said earlier, the thinner the line, the easier this is to complete. These other ones are so thin that it won't matter, actually. So we have these three. Now I turn this back on, select the inverse layer, press E for my eraser tool. Ooh, I didn't actually swap back to my... Press E. If this pops up, just hit OK. And now we can erase it, and what we have is that texture left over within those line works. Same thing with literally any other texture, and then at the end of this, and I'm just going to quickly fill some areas with color in an effort to display what I'm talking about. Let me just snag all of these, and let's say my wall is going to be red. Every time you do this, make sure you add a new layer. Ooh, I added two. So that we have, that's kind of cool, do a little spray paint effect. And then the end goal, of course, would be that we hide our lines layer, and we're left with something that displays the drawing in kind of a heightened sense. And you'll see that mine's white lines are really tiny because my actual black lines are just pixels wide. Make sure to label your line work too. But we would keep up with this, and we'd make these concrete and those concrete, and add a image here, and plants and people. And I think really fundamental to all this is starting to understand like walls versus ceiling versus these tiny little lips that stick out off the edges of things, and the mood. Like, what's the story of this place? What can we tell about these places based on the things that are inside of them? Um, think about tiles. Think about marbles. Think about woods. What is your color scheme gonna be? Um, I don't recommend just eye dropping an existing color scheme, but you can start by thinking about existing color schemes in some of these images. And this one I think is an example of one where we even pull like a real roof, right? Like the roof in this space is actually just an image that's been collaged in. This isn't actually a texture. Um, and so even things like that are just fantastic examples of how to think through these things. Look at real photos of the spaces, um, and start to just consider what goes where. We can learn about people from the spaces they're in. So what kind of story are your spaces trying to tell? But I'm going to leave it there. Keep the distort tool, selection areas, organized files, and you guys should have no problem in a very painterly fashion working your way through these images. You'll notice there are some tropes like having gray walls, colored doors, things of that nature. Feel free to work within those or outside of them, but I will say that if you work outside of some of those tropes, it's going to be a heck of a lot easier for you if you know why you're doing that. And don't just paint like this. Please use textures. I'm just trying to illustrate quickly for you guys. Oh, I'm not on my lines layer once again. How we might just begin to think about this, or maybe you can even do something like paint your whole image in an effort to think about the view, or the shot that you're producing. Control D, by the way, or Command D on a Mac, is how we deselect our areas. Oh, and see, so I just messed stuff up. I actually just painted the purple on the lines layer. So now when I hide it, I'm in trouble. So what I need to do is add a new layer, paint the purple back. I Control Z'd. Control D to deselect, and now we can hide the lines layer. And now the purple will stay. It is intact. And we can see it in relationship to the other thing. So yeah, and as you go through, you should be labeling what stuff is. You should never have to guess. Wall, texture, red, whatever it is. And then the last thing you can do, and I really don't recommend dealing any with shadow here. You see none of these have shadow. I would encourage you guys to stay the same. Keep them as kind of wallpapery as possible. But the last thing I would say you can do is think about how you can overlay things. So let's say, for an example, that you want a wood texture, but you really want your wood texture to be not this color. Something we can do is start to, just save it. We can start to, I'm just going to drag it in. Again, you're going to want to organize all these textures. Let's say I want purple wood for this part of Perloff. I can start to edit, transform, scale, no, distort. I'm going to slide one end over here, slide the other end up here, and then I'll just kind of warp it down. It's going to be impossibly huge. Again, please think about tile size as you guys are doing this. So mine, this is the biggest wood ever. Then I'll just go to my purple layer, select everything outside of it, hit erase. Oop, actually just erase purple things. Go back to new layer, hit OK. Erase everything that's off the purple, which will leave us just with the wood. And now, because the wood's on top, we can start to multiply it or use these filters or opacities to create a new texture for these things that doesn't exist. And these are in your opacity scroll right here for the whole layer. So normally we would just be lowering the opacity, and as we went from 0 to 100, it like makes one or the other visible. But this blending option allows you to both show something at 100 and multiply the colors. So like darkers make things darker. Only take darker colors. Add a soft light of this image to your thing. Add a hard light, vivid light. Even so much as dissolve, which actually starts to pixelate as you drop it down. Fewer and fewer pixels from the original are there. We're at 50%. 50% of the pixels are one thing, and 50% of the pixels are another. And again, this is a really hideous layout, but these are all the tools used to make images like you see here. And again, the goal at the very end is to not have the lines on and have an entirely curated image. 1920 by 1080, and I'll link in the description to this video below the video that Ken linked, so you guys can take a look at that as well. But without anything else, hope you guys have a good night, have a productive tomorrow, and see you guys on Thursday.